Hey, Ghost Machine fans, this one's for you.
Welcome to the 6th episode of the Ghost Machine Fans podcast. We had no new releases last week, so we're back for another deep dive. This time we're covering Junkyard Joe issues 1 through 3. I am Snoggle, and as usual, I'm joined by...
What are you gonna, you're not gonna call me anything?
Yeah, I mean, you are my special friend.
Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about that. That's true.
I mean, what would you like to be called?
I am Nick. And then we'll just leave it at that. We'll close that door right before it even opens. That sounds great. If this is number 6, is this number 4 for you, Snoggle?
I don't know. I'm in a bit of a haze myself. As you know, I've been sick recently.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Appreciate you championing through it and still doing this evening as you're still on the tail end of it.
I do what I can.
Yep. Well, that's what I was going to say. This is Junkyard Joe 1 through 3. You did Geiger 1 through 3, Geiger 4 through 6 in 2 episodes, and you did Geiger 80-page giant in 1. So this is number 4 for you. And so if anybody hasn't caught on to that theme, we are reading the books in chronological order leading up to the current time, which normally if it was, the X-Men or the Avengers or Batman, it'd be like impossible, right? Like you couldn't even do that. And in this case, what's so cool about Ghost Machine is we can literally read all the books up to right now, catch you up, and when a new comic comes out, like, you will be current, which is a terrible catch-22 for people like us, because it's like, no, I want to read all the stories, which there are none in the past that we can go back to read more of if we wait for the new issues to come out.
So, really, if you were just patient, you could wait for it all to come out and then read it at once.
Yeah, you could, but this stuff is going on every day. The Ghost Machine crew, they were at the Philadelphia Fan Expo over the weekend, which is one of the shout-outs that we really wanted to make right now. That is to our friend Millhouses. That's hashtag MILHOUSEZ on Instagram. Our buddy Jason, also from the Facebook group. That's the same person. I'm just letting you know who that is. He went to that expo and he gave a lot of the folks in the Facebook group and us an awesome play-by-play of what was going on. He let us know about the new variants that they had that they were selling at the Ghost Machine booth. They were pretty cool. There were some new foil variants and some new metal variants that they came out with. There was like a silver Ghost Machine #1 foil, a new metal Geiger cover, and a red coat Francis Manapool foil cover that was super cool. People have seen a lot of that on the Ghost Machine Pro page. So Jason was there. He was letting everybody know what was going on. And I got to tell you, apparently they didn't mind if folks bought more than one of the issues, because these are books you could only get if you went to this convention, Snoggle. But apparently you were allowed to buy more than one within reason. And so what Jason did is he let everybody in the Facebook group know this is how much they cost. And they gave the actual numbers, no price increase or whatever, not trying to make any money, and just said, hey, like, you pay shipping, I'll send this to you. And I legitimately know that several people in that Facebook group got comics that they otherwise couldn't get by not attending that con, because the only other way is going to be some people are going to put them on eBay and they're going to obviously want to make something. They're going to want to sell more. So this guy went out of his way to do that. He also sent us some really cool pictures from the Ghost Machine panel. And he's also who we are going to be interviewing next week, because
excellent.
Yeah, he's who I was talking about. I know everybody thought I was making it up or whatever. Who's the ex crazy NPC that they're going to interview? No, this is a human. The reason we're going to interview him is because he attended MegaCon, which was when they had a VIP Ghost Machine dinner at Maggiano's, and he attended that. So we're going to get to hear all about what that was like.
Maggiano's, the Italian delight.
Well, yeah, when you think about it, that's funny. He said that, and we were like, well, yeah, we like Maggiano's. I think we both of our companies at some point is a thing. Like, you have a big enough group of people, your business takes you to Maggiano's, right? Because it's family style Italian dining, right?
Wow.
So Jason was actually at that event, and he's going to be giving us the rundown about what that was like. In my experience, the Ghost Machine crew is just a pleasure to talk to. So can't wait to hear more about that from him.
Excitement.
Yep. Stand-up guy. Thanks for all the help that you gave everybody on that, Jason.
Oh my gosh. I think you almost forgot to tell them what we did this weekend.
You're right. What was this weekend? Soccer tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And
free comic book day.
It was free comic book day. So we went to our local comic book shop, which is Up and Away Comics in Cheviot, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. They have 2 locations out here, one on the west side, one on the east side.
West side, best side.
Yeah, we're on the west side. We went there for 9 a.m. They had a line out the door. But free comic book day, this is only my second one ever that I really recall. I don't remember doing it much with my dad when I was young, even though he did buy me lots of comic books. And the reason this is my second one is because last year I decided to go for the first time to take Bruce. And this year was super awesome because you came with us, so all 3 of us went.
I know, and I won as a prize because I have extensive, great knowledge of comic books.
Yeah, so the trivia question was, what pop star is rumored to play Dazzler in the upcoming Deadpool and Wolverine movie? And there's like 30 people in this line, that like comics.
I stuck my hand up when they immediately said Dazzler.
Yeah.
I was like, I know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone on this knows it's Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm. And for that, our son got a hat from the comic book store, like an Up and Away hat, which he's now obsessed with and is wearing everywhere. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Pretty stoked about that. So we don't really do free comic book day for us at all. I have a pull list at my store. I prepay for my stuff. I go in and it's just picked up. What was your free comic book day experience? We had an artist that drew something cool for our son.
Yes. I mean, we were walking around the store, obviously, talking to people. I was with Bruce, and this older gentleman came up and was like, is that your husband and your son? And I was like, yes, it is. And he goes on this long thing, gets all teary-eyed. It was almost like movie-esque. Mm-hmm. I started taking my son to comic book day, and now I'm here with my grandson. I'm like, oh. And then when I told him what Bruce's name is, he was like Batman. And I was like, absolutely. So just very fun. And, every time we've been to Up and Away, the individuals at that store are just always really kind.
And it was really neat what happened. Mm-hmm. It was like we should have went and bought a lottery ticket. Because as many comic book shops do on free comic book day is all about giving away a bunch of free comic books, and bringing in new people to read comic books and expanding the audience and getting comics in the hands of kids that may not always have a chance to get them. Then typically the stores will do cool stuff because it drives traffic into the stores. And they'll have blind boxes and blind bags. In this case, they had both. And we bought both. And we were on the way out, and then it started to torrential downpour. And as proper comic book collectors, we were like, we don't have an umbrella. And even if we did, I don't know if we can make it to the car with all these comic books that we just bought in this box. So we're going to have to wait anyway. So we decided to open our blind bag. Bruce decided to open his blind bag. And it was really funny because the blind bag had 20 something of the same graphic novel, which was, I don't even remember the name of it, but it was some obviously we love independent comics. We're talking about independent comics, but it was something I'd never heard of by a company I'd never heard of. They clearly just had it in there as are you for real? I thought it was a joke. And one of the guys there that works there says, hey, no, for that one, you need to look at the bottom. And so we pulled out these several pounds of this same horrible comic book that none of us recognized, this trade paperback for it, and take it out, put it on the floor or whatever. And on the bottom of it, there's this sweet sign that says, go see MODOK for your prize. And MODOK from the X-Men Marvel Universe, people have heard of. He's the nickname of one of the folks that works there. And that is what he did. And they gave him a Marvel Zombies omnibus that they took a picture of him in front of their brand new Justice League Lego mural, which was absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. And get this, Ghost Machine fans, even though it was a mural that was done in kind of a classic Justice League Unlimited style of the Legos, they made it look like a comic book because they had all the little details of who the writers and stuff were and the publisher, and they had the DC logo. And then the 3 creators that they listed were Jeff Johns, Jason Fabak, and Brad Anderson on this Justice League Lego wall. And obviously, those guys have all done plenty of Justice League. It's appropriate. But I just thought it was fitting that in this era, that was Because they could have chosen plenty of different Justice League people.
Well, they designed that entire DC wall themselves.
Yeah.
They're like Lego masters.
Yeah, I know. They had it behind a curtain. They had it behind a curtain for a long time.
Reveal.
Yeah, so it was super cool. It was super cool. And they have a ton of Ghost Machine stuff there, too.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure to check them out on Comic Hub. That's a good place where you can find their store if you don't live in the Cincinnati metro area. Also, one other thing we wanted to put out there, there's a video of Rob Lee, best letter in comics, Rob Lee, who we talk about, did the letters on all these books. He spoke in a very heartfelt way about how attending this convention has made him feel and how interacting with these fans has made him feel. And if you have not seen that video, I encourage you to go to either Ghost Machine Pro or Ghost Machine Fans on Instagram, and the videos in both places. Check out Rob Lee and his awesome words. You can see why the man is the best letters in comics. Don't forget about the letters, And let's let that lead us to our discussion of Junkyard Joe, Volume 1 through 3. There is only one volume of Junkyard Joe so far. I'm banking on there being another ongoing series one day. And in this case, obviously Rob Lee did the letters. We just mentioned that. This is another Jeff Johns, Gary Frank joint creators deal, where mostly Jeff is doing the writing and Gary is doing the illustrations with the pencils. And it is colored, as usual, by the incomparable Brad Anderson. And this is the absolute opportune time. We won't forget. We'll know this time, because we have a very strict outline that we're following here in this case.
Oh, extremely strict.
Yeah, very strict here. So, they can't forget that the way our podcast is designed is that we are going to talk about everything about this book. We're not going to summarize it in every way or anything like that, but we are definitely going to spoil everything that happens, and you won't really enjoy us talking about this as much unless you've read it too. So I would recommend, if you haven't read Junkyard Joe Volume 1, Issues 1 through 3, to pause the podcast. It is super easy to find these books at your local comic shop. They should have copies of them. A lot were printed. They're still out there. You can find them online, and you can read this online too, digitally, if you want. Just go ahead and buy Junkyard Joe Volume 1. It's a compilation of 6 issues. Just a little background on this one, Snoggle. This is still another Mad Ghost joint. This is pre-Ghost Machine.
I assume that from the bottom left corner say Mad Ghost.
You're talking about a certain cover. What cover is that? What's your cover look like there?
My cover looks like a comic book strip in snow. It's a Junkyard Joe comic book strip, and then there's blood by the snow. Perhaps some foreshadowing.
Definitely some foreshadowing. It's another literary term that we bring to the table here at Ghost Machine Fans. Mm-hmm. That is the cover of the trade paperback collected edition. So if you went online and do what I said a second ago and you wanted to buy this, you'd see that. Or if you go buy that trade at the local comic shop, that's going to be the cover. So that wasn't the original cover for Junkyard Joe #1. There are a whole lot of different ones. This book was released, the first issue, in October of 2022. And then all of the, I think there were 6 or 7 of them, regular covers, they were all reprinted again in November in honor of Veterans Day. So all the covers were reprinted again in black and white for Veterans Day, which is pretty cool to me. That was one thing, I am going to gush over this comic book. I really love this comic book, but it is legitimately, they tried to launch it in support of veterans in a lot of ways and veteran awareness and stuff like that. So I was just wondering, do you have any veterans in your family?
Oh, I do.
I know, but they don't. So I have to pose it as a question to you.
Well, my stepdad, he is currently in the Navy.
Yeah.
Several uncles have served. My brothers, he's ex-Navy now. I mean, I had several of my mom's brothers served in Vietnam.
They were overseas in Vietnam?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My dad was in Vietnam, part of the draft. And my grandfather, his dad, was in the 101st Airborne at Normandy. He jumped out of a plane onto the beach and got the Purple Heart. And so, in brief, this comic is, I think, significant in a way that not all comic books are. And people probably pick this up and read it, and they don't know that it had really anything to do with veterans a couple of years ago, when they did that. But there's certainly a lot in the content about veteran and military awareness and things like that we'll talk about to an extent. We're not going to take it too seriously because we know we want to have fun and talk about an awesome comic book. But just did want to take a moment and recognize all the awesome veterans and service folks out there, and thank you for that. This comic and episode is for you. It did come out after Geiger 80-Page Giant. This is the very next thing that happens. So this is a diversion, at least as far as we know, for a while. She's only read the first 3 issues from the unnamed continuity, even though we did see Junkyard Joe last getting in a fight with Tariq, as you recall.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned how yours has the comic book strip on the cover. So as you begin this comic, it does not begin with the story that takes place in the war. It begins with a page of a comic book strip, right?
Yeah.
What does that comic book strip make you think of?
Just like the normal Sunday funnies.
The normal Sunday funnies. And so how does that make you feel? Nostalgic, yeah. But this isn't a thing that was ever there before, right? Like, this isn't real. This is something that Jeff Johns came up with in 2020, well, published in 2022. And I read that and I was like, oh, Calvin and Hobbes. Oh, Peanuts.
Garfield.
Snoopy. Garfield.
Kathy.
Don't know that one.
Oh, you don't know Kathy?
Oh, no.
Oh, goodness.
If you're as offended as her, Ghost Machine fans, please email ghostmachinefans@gmail.com so that there's some validation, because I have no idea what she's talking about.
When you can tell that someone didn't wait to read the Sunday funnies, you don't know who Kathy is.
What about Marmaduke?
I know who Marmaduke is. Okay. Mostly from our child.
Yeah, and that movie. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing. So this comic strip, it does obviously have like a message where there's this sergeant telling these troops to be just like the robot troop and be more like that. It's trying to say, you know, that the military, in the eyes of this author, who is an author with looking through the lens of the Vietnam era, he's saying that the best troops are ones like robots. You know, like that's meant to indicate that they're not to be treated like humans, or a whole nother different type of thing that can be interpreted.
Or they need to be superhuman.
Yeah.
Void of emotion.
Absolutely devoid of emotion. Like, unrealistic expectations is the point, right? The thing is, it's a world within the world. It's an extra layer. That's why this isn't. I almost hate calling it a comic book to some people because they won't understand the depth that we're getting. Because by that strip actually existing, it helps immerse us significantly more. Because we've read a page in the Geiger series where Haley and Henry go, it's Junkyard Joe, except he looks mean. Or it's like, you remember the panel I'm talking about? I'm not going to look it up right now, but like, that's where them being like, oh, or they say something like, I don't remember them looking like that in the papers or whatever. So we see that, and it's kind of dark. The second page it's like ink kind of comes across the page to set the tone, and then you get told that you're in 1972. What did you think of this? Basically like a mural that they've got going on here.
It immerses you in where they're at.
Have you seen Platoon?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen Apocalypse Now?
No.
You haven't?
Mm-mm.
It's the same. Well, not really. Same in terms of like...
I've seen Forrest Gump.
Yeah, that's a little bit of this. There's some of that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. They were in Vietnam. That's true.
What other war movies you want to throw at me?
No,
Predator?
Not if Predator had to fight Unit Beta, then the whole thing might have gone differently. No, you get this gorgeous Gary Frank splash page that is a military encampment, a U.S. military encampment in Vietnam. You just kind of know right away where they are because you've seen these types of characters before in film and TV, and it's almost like the whole page is moving. And you see this cast of characters that we're going to find out are all the junkyard dogs that travel together. And there's this helicopter in the background that starts to enter, the base. And you can hear it with the way it's drawn. You can hear the propellers. Again, the narrator is muddy, and he says, we might have all been from different places and believed in different things, but that didn't seem to matter much, because we all wanted the same thing, really. We wanted to go home. And it's almost as if my familiarity with the concept of soldiers in Vietnam desperately wanting to go home, even though I've seen it in other work or whatever, that it assists me in being able to jump right into this situation and get into whatever it's really kind of about, as opposed to just a typical Vietnam story.
Oh, absolutely. For any of the soldiers that I know, yes, they're there, they're doing a duty, but they would 100% rather be at home.
Sure. I'm thinking of the type of thing you hear about in Vietnam to such an extent, though, where, you know, you'd have your orders and they'd know to the day, like how long, because the survival rate was so low. And you can see the exhaustion on some of these characters' faces. And each individual one has their own position, has their own identity with the way that Gary has drawn them. It's just mind-blowing. And what's cool is there's not that even many different tones on the color wheel that Brad Anderson uses here. It's just green and tan, a whole bunch of different green and tan with a tiny little bit of blue in the sky. But he's able to really pull it off. A lot of really cool light and shadow. Tells you what time of day it is in this scene. And that helicopter keeps on flying in. And you still get, like, it's just like so many Vietnam movies that, like, you know, the new soldier comes in and deals with the gruff sergeant and all that kind of stuff. And get off your butt, you got stuff to do, et cetera, et cetera. Except there's this just nuanced little thing. The second time you see Joe, the first time you see him, he's just sitting down. Or I should say Unit Beta. That's a significant thing that I want to talk about, why he really is Unit Beta. But then the second panel that you see him, it's just him turning his head and you see this WHRR from Mr. Rob Lee. And it's meant to be... And it's like, oh, that thing's neck just made like a mechanical whirring sound. And that's all we need to know that there's like a distinct difference in the story that we're about to hear.
You picked up on a detail that I didn't see.
You didn't catch that?
No.
What was your impression of... Did you know that was Joe at the time then?
I did not. I was thinking more along the lines of... What's the kid from Teen Titans Go?
Cyborg?
Yeah. Where, like, someone who was human was turned into a robot.
We don't know that isn't the case yet.
Correct. I don't know a lot of things. All I know is from that first panel, I asked you, I said, which one of these is Junkyard Joe?
Oh,
I still didn't even know. I was just going along with it. And then I think I figured it out as they were walking through the woods and stuff.
Because he stops responding.
Yeah, he just never said anything to them ever.
Let's talk about your foreshadowing, though, right? So we get a little bit of a touch of Muddy writing to his wife. He's got a picture. We get the idea. He's all, you know, that's a really big part of his identity. And then he tries to introduce himself to the FNG, you know, the effing new guy. That is how they refer to him, because they're like, why the heck did they send us a totally new grunt? Just go out into the jungle, blah, blah, blah. They won't even look at his orders.
Gosh, I can't believe I didn't know what FNG stands for.
Well, we're not going to say what it stands for, because this is a wholesome environment, young lady.
I understand, but I just thought it was like a military term. Well, is it?
I know what it means, but I don't know that it's... I think it is definitely used in the military a lot, but I've heard it used at like a pizza place too. You know, like maybe it originated there. If you're in...
Probably.
Why don't you ask your stepdad?
Oh, he would know.
Yeah, because he's active.
Right? I like when they said rats fart.
Rats fart. Yep. Mm-hmm. It speaks to the era. It wouldn't be colloquial to talk about a rat's fart in that context in 2024.
I'm using it now. I don't give a rat's fart where you're from.
Actually, I think as long as you stick with that type of verbiage, we still aren't considered an explicit podcast. So you do that as much as you want.
Oh, excellent.
The foreshadowing I wanted to talk about really briefly is Muddy goes, and this is where you see Muddy's kind of like a good guy, you know, he's wanting to talk to everybody, he's very positive, and he goes to try to introduce himself to this new person that we know as Unit Beta. At this time, he still has like the skin job replicant skin on, or whatever you want to call it. I'm a Blade Runner person, so that comes to mind. He doesn't appear like a cyborg. He doesn't appear like a robot duck, as you and my son have so eloquently told me.
He does look like a robot duck.
He doesn't right now. He looks like a human dude.
I see that. Perfectly chiseled.
He doesn't respond, right? Because as far as we know, Joe doesn't talk, or Unit Beta doesn't talk. When Muddy asks him, hey, like, are you, what's going on? Where are you from? And because he doesn't respond, Muddy goes, you're scared, I'd gather. Don't feel bad, huh? You wouldn't be human if you weren't. And it's like, dun, dun, dun.
I picked up on that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, and they leave and they have to go on this mission, as soldiers in Vietnam do have to do, with a map through the jungles, and it's miserable stuff. And this is where we learn a whole lot about Joe with some cool visual storytelling, but we get our first instance of how Gary Frank is a master of the unexpected headshot.
Oh my gosh. Took me by surprise. I flipped the page and was just, oh my goodness.
I think that's significant to why it's positioned that way. You know what I mean? So that you don't see it until
of course.
That time. There's an argument for that, why it's a great panel-to-panel read, because they don't go outside the panel as much. So in that case, it would have been truly surprising if you were doing panel-to-panel reading digitally.
Now, I'm not a fan of headshots in general, but the artwork on this, excellent. Superb. You could still even see the little stars in the background.
My question for Brad Anderson is, what's the name of the hue of pink that you used to illustrate the half of Band-Aid's face coming off?
Ugh.
So in case you're not following...
That's your question?
No, of course not, but that's funny to say.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, if that was the only question I could ask him, no. If I could ask him any number of questions, that would probably be like...
That would be one of them.
Down the list. To generate awesome conversation like with you. In case you're not with us exactly where we're at, they have to go on a mission. It's at night. They're trying to figure out where they went wrong. And Unit Beta still is just kind of standing by the edge of things. He seems naturally inclined to stand guard. Before I forget, do you think that everybody gets... why does everybody always get cool nicknames in Vietnam? I mean, they give you the gamut. Like there's Sarge, Big Jack, Green, Bumbles, Band-Aid, and Muddy, I think, is everybody.
And FNG.
And FNG at the moment, right? And so it's significant, though, because what they're doing as they're sitting there looking at the map, trying to determine what's going to happen next, where they're going to go, Jeff Johns establishes in their conversation their names. And their names are significant because there's something else that has to happen with their names at the end of this issue, right? Then we see that shot that we mentioned just a few seconds ago. Band-Aid gets shot through the face, and we just see another Rob Lee. That's what I want to know. I want to know who writes the sound effects. Do they say, Rob, you make the words for this bullet going through Band-Aid's face in like a quiet way, and he wrote BVTTT? Or, is that a Jeff Johns thing? That's a great question. I'm going to find out the answer to that question. Because then it's, some rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. So that's machine gun fire. And they all jump because Band-Aid's down. And then you just see Unit Beta and him lifting his weapon, cocking it, and then some awesome visual storytelling with the first shot into the jungle, another one, and then we see the silhouette of somebody going down. The second one, same silhouette. Third one, another one. You can see him falling to the side. And then the characters are all watching like, oh my goodness, what is going on? And then on top of it all, remember how I said Junkyard Joe always can't keep a uniform going for nothing. No fight ever lasts any time with the uniform. It looks like there's an enemy running out of the swamp jungle area, and the bad guy, he's got 2 bombs or grenade types, like improvised grenades, one in each hand. They're running away from him, trying to get away. And then instead, the FNG, like you said, he runs towards this guy, tackles him. But then there's just this massive explosion. And I love the sound effect that they have as that explosion rains down on Joe. It's like this. Just so many cool sound effects in this whole situation as he walks back out of the swamp, out of the water, onto the dirt. And he's just this thing making these robot noises. And for some reason, he has the compulsion to go for the nearest available uniform. He goes to Band-Aid stuff and pulls out his, I'm assuming like backup uniform or something of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts it on so he can get back to what he's programmed to do, which is watch over this platoon of soldiers. But notice that he didn't have Joseph on his uniform prior.
Oh, yeah. So Band-Aid's name was Joseph. So this is really the moment that made him Junkyard Joe.
Correct. This is the moment that made him Junkyard Joe for Muddy, right? Because Muddy's who named him for all intents and purposes. And I'm gonna have a question to ask you when you see what he's wearing as this story progresses. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I have a conundrum. I have a continuity conundrum that I would like to discuss.
I'm excited.
So he's ready to rock. And they're like, what are we going to do? Oh my gosh, did you guys see what he just did? Because understand, it's not like he's tough, so he just shot into the woods. He didn't miss. He basically took out every enemy in the dark. He could see them in the dark. He did things that were impossible for a human being to do.
I know that I've never been in a jungle in the middle of a war zone, but after anything saved me from obviously that many people, jumped on a person coming to suicide bomb me and my friends, I don't think I would even have an argument about that. I'd instantly be on that thing's team. And their first instinct is to like put their guns at Junkyard Joe.
Well, I think they're super scared, but
I know.
You know, the sergeant pretty quickly shuts them down. He's like, yeah, any of you want it on the other side after you saw how well it shoots? And it appears like he's just going to go along with them. And then that's where we start to see the true depth of what this character comes. I think he is a character in and of himself, because all we know right now is that there's some sort of artificial intelligence involved, or maybe he's like remotely controlled. Possibly that. Who knows? They cut to the next day. They're all going to play cards, and they're like, you know, you should invite him to join us. Like, you should ask the robot guy to come join us. And it's kind of like, well, you know, I don't think he's going to play any cards or whatever. Like, why would you do that? That's when we see another instance where Muddy like tries to talk to him, and he tells him about his wife being a good card player and all this stuff. Then kind of walks away, but tells him, if you want to come over here, we'll teach you how to do this. And so why Snoggle does Unit Beta decide to walk over there and play cards with them? He's an as far as I understand, whether he's wherever, whoever controls him, however it happens, whatever. I don't think he's controlled remotely. I think he can just be talked to remotely. It's because we're going to see that happen later.
Mm-hmm.
Why would this artificial intelligence, whose job is to protect them, choose to play cards with them?
Well, there's no logical reason. Or maybe I'm just missing the logical reason, because he wants to.
There's like so many different conclusions that we can draw. But what I'm saying is there any way that maybe he's still protecting them or something by going over there and playing cards with them? Like, is it somehow still logical to him that these, like, because he's there for all intents and purposes, as far as we know, to determine the viability of the victory in this conflict. And so is there anything about his presence that he knows, okay, I should go do this thing with them because this is something that they need, like it repowers them, it helps them, like whatever.
Maybe that's what it began as, like seeing what the actual soldiers were all about. But I think it grew to that because the next couple of scenes, he's walking, it seems like all of them feel very comfortable to talk to Junkyard Joe just about anything.
That was exactly my thought. Each page of the panel after they play poker, which he clearly mops them up in, which makes a lot of sense because he's, you know, a cyborg with a deductive mind. But each panel on the following page is a different soldier communicating with him in a way where they clearly benefit from being able to do so. Several of them are telling him about their loved ones back home. You know, some of them are just, one of them laughs because he's able to have a joke with him. Another one makes a point about, like, they didn't think everything here would be so hard to do, which is something that later Muddy recalls in one of his dreams. And so it's very clear that at least the storytellers here are trying to say this being, whether he's artificial or not, is having a beneficial effect on all of these soldiers around him.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like super ironic, right? Compared to the first page of the strip, where it's like, we need all the soldiers to be like robots. Just drink some more oil or whatever. And then it takes a turn. This is not a comic book series that remains in Vietnam for long.
No, sad.
Sad.
I thought they all died, to be honest. But it does make, obviously, more sense for the comic to continue and begin that Muddy had to make it.
It does. And here's the thing. It is, if you've read this comic, you know what happens. They come upon a booby-trapped, like, bison or cow of some kind with, like, C4 strapped to its belly, and it blows them up. And then they also have some enemy fighters in the woods, in the trees, in the jungle that attack them. And everybody dies one by one and gets a panel dedicated to it. And this is why it's significant that we know all their names. You get to see each of their names on the panels that they perish in. And it is a very graphic thing. Like, this is not a comic book couple of pages to show to a young person at all, but it is amazing art. And again, like that color, I mean, especially the red, the way that the red is used when Sarge and Green get shot, it's like, whew, you can tell that he really knows the right red to use to stick out in that situation.
The best part is all of a sudden he's getting talked to, like, hey, the mission's over. And then he ignores who's ever in charge of him and goes and kills the dudes who just killed all of his, what I would think he considers his friends now.
Yes, so let's walk through that. Everyone dies except Muddy. Muddy is still alive, and what happens is Junkyard Joe, Unit Beta, he kills one of the enemy fighters with a punch, so the others run. And they say, go back to the village, run. And then Unit Beta picks up Muddy to take him out because he's still alive. And then Muddy is like, they killed him, they killed our friends, as he falls unconscious on the beach. And then that's the first time we see the words Unit Beta, because it's like this, it's whatever you call the bubble. It's like electronic communication. It doesn't go to his head. It's just like hovering next to it. But, you know, it's electronic communication because of the way that, like, the spines on the bubble work or whatever. I bet somebody knows all those technical things. You should email us. And it says, Unit Beta, mission is over. Head south to base. I repeat, Unit Beta, head south to base. You know, and all that kind of stuff. And he just ruminates on it, this robot, quote unquote, and makes the conclusion that he needs to go fight these guys that just attacked, that went back to their village. So again, why do you play cards? Why would an artificial intelligence make this decision? Because ultimately, if it's being implied that he has developed an emotional relationship to these people that just got killed, and that he's going to make this choice because of that, is that any different than him making the logical decision to understand that maybe that's the source of the conflict that he's supposed to end or determine if is winnable, which is the reason he was sent there. And so the conclusion is to go kill them. Like, that's somewhat logical to me. I could see him choosing to continue to like disobey the command and go forward.
No, I think it's straight up that he's beginning to understand empathy. But as he goes there and he's killing, you know, these people who killed his friends, he accidentally shoots that little boy, the small child. And it kind of seems like after that's all said and done, he rips his gun in half and just kind of turns himself off.
Yes.
He not only showed empathy, but he showed remorse and regret. Why else would he turn himself off?
So what I'm saying is, yes, he does show remorse. He does show regret. He chooses to turn himself off. And is it possible to say that in this instance, remorse and regret and choosing to no longer be a source of violence in this conflict, which caused said remorse and regret, can they be logical things as well as emotional things? And I think there's like a strong argument to say that this intelligence can be operating purely from a hyper high intelligence level and make the conclusion that it needs to shut down. Because the impression that we get here is not that, its handlers who have been talking to it versus via its communicator thing are in control of it. Because they tell him what to do and he doesn't do it. And then I think they can see through his eyes. But after he realizes that the gun in his hand killed the child, he breaks the gun in two and he gets down on his knees and he shuts down. And then President Nixon and some other scientific advisors, we go to this room where they're talking, and this is cool. This is another instance where Jeff Johns says, I'm going to drop a little nugget in here and tell you in this historical context why in this world the Vietnam War really ended. And they say to him, Unit Beta finished its analysis of the war, Mr. President, and it shut down. It means this war is unwinnable. We need to end it, Mr. President. And so it's implied that was the whole reason that Unit Beta was sent there. Curious, because if he was lacking the ability to gain those understandings and relationships, soldiers as dangerous as him certainly could have won the Vietnam War. Even maybe a handful, because of how powerful they were.
So they must not have a handful.
But
he's Unit Beta.
So number 2, right?
Yeah.
Right. We don't know about Alpha. We don't know about Charlie.
Yeah.
Yet.
I picked up on that. Oh.
I mean, there is not a thing about anybody else yet. In terms
spoil for me now.
No, that's not. I wish there was. We need more Junkyard Joe. We're not getting enough. And then we cut all the way to today. This takes place in Indiana.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Didn't you live in Indiana for a while?
Didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we met.
We met
in Indiana.
You said that so accusatory.
Yeah.
Didn't you? Didn't we live in Indiana together?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I remember now. The smaller towns in Indiana that you lived in, how did they compare to the way that we see our first glimpse of where Muddy lives?
Not pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's cold outside, obviously. There's snow.
There is snow. And what's neat about this is if we were reading comic books made by other companies, not all other companies, but certain other companies, you would see a paragraph at the start of this comic that would say something like, we take you now to a small town in Indiana where Muddy Davis, a famous cartoon creator, lives, and he's the guy you saw in the previous. It would be like exposition. It would just tell you what's happening. And instead of that, we have this awesome news story and then montage of different parts of his office. And it's like almost chronological, right? Like we see the picture of him and the Junkyard Jogs in Vietnam on his wall. Then we see a picture of him and his wife getting married on his wall. Then we see them kind of a little bit later in their life together on his wall above some Junkyard Joe kitsch. Like it's a viewfinder toy, like a coffee cup that says Junkyard Joe and an action figure plushie type of thing. And then leading to his drawing board, and then he's not there, which is the point. Because as we get this cool montage of like essentially the camera panning around the room and then panning out, very cinematic, we're hearing that he has chosen to retire, which also after 50 years seems to have happened around the same time or shortly after his wife had passed away.
It's like the Up montage on one page.
Oh my gosh. It is like the Up montage. You're referring to the Pixar film.
Of course I am.
Oh, that's a rough beginning, right? Because it's such a good movie. And then you're just like, every time you got to sit through that.
It gives it heart.
Yeah, it does. That's for sure. So we understand that she's passed away. He's retiring from making the cartoon. And we learn that he's very reclusive and stuff like that. So he doesn't, talk to a lot of people or whatever. There's just so much detail in his office. Like, props to Gary Frank. You can see every little thing. He's got these awards. Everyone is different. It's just so much awesome visual storytelling is happening. It's just fantastic. I even like the way that Muddy Davis's footprints look in the snow as he's coming out of his house.
Footprints.
I like footprints in Indiana. It's not how they talk in Indiana.
No, not at all.
And so before we were talking about this, before we were recording the episode, we were talking about the things we liked about it. And I wanted to talk all about the robot and his process and all that kind of stuff. You wanted to talk about, I think, these folks, right?
Well, to a degree, like, here's my thing. Like, you go from, like, he obviously quit everything and he's sad he's inside. And he definitely doesn't want to talk to his neighbors. He's, like, that kind of recluse. I do think whatever's going to happen to this family and or him is going to be sad. Now, I could be totally wrong. It's just the beginning where it shows the comic book strip underneath the snow with the blood. Mm-hmm. It just led me to believe that someone here is not going to make it. You know, hopefully I'm super wrong, but I like the whole story trope of, like, old man doesn't want anything to do with the kids next door. There's obviously something sad going on, which we find out later. It's the mom died. I don't know. You got to make it interesting to why they want to know what's going on in that house.
I think they're very interesting because it's interesting to me how Jeff and Gary tell you all about them in 4 panels. Mm-hmm. So there's just these quick 4 panels where they're getting out of their moving truck and Muddy looks over at them with this clear face of indifference. Like somehow Gary Frank was able to be like, here's the look of indifferent eyes. Here you go. Boom. Right there. And this family of 4, a widowed father and 3 children, like you said, each one gets a panel and they're like kind of connected panels. And you see Sam, the dad, and he's got like, you know, a peacoat type of thing going on and a turtleneck. And then you see Grace. The way in which that Grace is drawn, especially like her attire not being really cold weather oriented, indicates who, you know, the kind of character she might be. And that kind of leads us to what she is. She's a bit materialistic. And she even says later that she's not going to be, she won't even wear a winter coat because of how it looks. And then Emily is like kind of the opposite of that. And we see that she's really slouching a bit. And like she lacks confidence. And her coat is super big and warm, too big for her. And then their littlest brother, Will, he is barely paying attention because he's got like a Nintendo Switch in his hands or whatever. So I'm just, obviously, as you learn more about them and then maybe read this page again, it all connects more. But I think most comic books people think of that. Like they write it in a way where you're like, yeah, I'm going to go read that again. And then the way that each of them was drawn is going to even make more sense to me, even though it was a foreshadow or a precursor to whatever. It's just smart work, you know? It's a lot better than me seeing a big paragraph that says, and Will was like this, and Grace was like this. And speaking of which, that's an obvious reference. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think what that is it's trying to speak to Sam's is our age, basically, because of the reference to Will and Grace, the 90s sitcom. And then it's like, well, at the same time, there's no, I don't remember, but I don't think there's an Emily involved in Will and Grace. So that's another way to imply Emily's kind of the outsider.
Well, first of all, remember earlier how we were talking about the funnies and I brought up Kathy?
Yeah.
So he says, Betty Davis is a famous cartoonist like Charles Schultz and Kathy, Jesuit?
Geiswhite?
I don't know.
It's one of those.
But she did Kathy.
Oh, she named the cartoon after herself?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Kathy was like a slightly, like, she's just female. Feeling all of her things.
I feel like this is a Berenstein.
No, Kathy is...
I've never heard of this.
Dear listeners.
Snoopy.
Please prove this man wrong.
Marmaduke. Well, no, they're all in the new multiverse anyway.
But I just think it's interesting that he really cites the person who wrote Kathy.
Absolutely. And Charles Schulz is who?
He wrote Peanuts.
Right. Snoopy, Charlie Brown, Woodstock, etc. And I wanted to point that out as well. I'm really glad that you did. Makes sense that you did. Because that's another layer of that deeper immersion that's almost like fourth dimensional immersion. for me, because they're saying, like, I'm going to give you the actual Junkyard Joe strip to read at the beginning of this whole thing. You're going to get to feel the vibe and what we're trying to communicate here. But then the characters are also going to have read that too. But then the characters are also going to refer to real life people, which is going to make it easier for you as a reader to identify with exactly what they're trying to accomplish. So it's like Value City for me. This isn't just a quick comic book or whatever, you know?
I just love the fact that I didn't even realize they used the same jargon that I used, Sunday Funnies.
Yeah.
They definitely weren't called Sunday Funnies. It was just the Sunday paper had all the funny, comic strips, and they were colored. Mm-hmm. And it was like, wow, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm. And then we get a sense of how truly alone Muddy feels. And again, it's not a big long paragraph that says, and these were Muddy Davis's final days. This is how he felt that day. No, none of that. Instead, he gets a voicemail or an answering machine message, it looks like. His editor basically saying, like, I know you don't really know who I am, but I'm here for you in case you're sad that your wife passed away. By the way, that's my name. I've been your editor for like 3 years. So he's disconnected from that person entirely. You know what I mean? Like, he is not interested in any kind of support. And then you get him further alienated by having the dreams, you know what I mean? Like, it exacerbates it. It's been 50 years, almost, because of when he got out of the war to now. Because this is essentially, I think, it was meant to be like 2022. He's got a Nintendo Switch, for all intents and purposes. Even though it doesn't give you a date, it just says now when it does that. But we know if it's 2022, we're less than 10 years away from the unknown war. So Terry Geiger's out there in Boulder City right now. I don't think he's been diagnosed yet with the big C, though. And we see him get up, middle of the night, see that coffee cup again, that world's greatest wife coffee cup. He's walking down the stairs, tons more cool Rob Lee sound effects. I'm just going to give Rob the credit, even if Jeff made the words. He made the sounds look the right way so I could hear them. And on the footsteps, there is somebody. Who is it?
Junkyard Joe.
It's actually him now.
He doesn't have his Joe outfit on anymore, though.
But he's still wearing a U.S. Army outfit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to clarify this. When we see him in Vietnam initially, he does not have a name on his uniform. Then, after Band-Aid dies and his uniform gets incinerated in the explosion, he takes Band-Aid's uniform and it says Joseph on it.
Mm-hmm.
Then, after Vietnam, he shuts down. Then we're seeing him 50 years later in Indiana, showing up with a uniform on. It doesn't have a name on it. It just says U.S. Army. Reminder, if you've made it with us this far, if you recall, on the very last page of Geiger number 5, after the vice president says, we don't tolerate violence here, it's time to bring the robot online, you see the uniform right there. It doesn't say Joseph like it did in Vietnam. It doesn't say nothing like it does on this page. It says Joe. So I'm just curious, because we know he gets reprogrammed between now and then. But we really don't know exactly why he's here yet. And that's Muddy's first reaction. Like, Muddy freaks out. Muddy probably thinks he's not, he's like, you're not real. What's going on? Like, cool, another bunch of visual storytelling montage. And what slows it all down is Joe seeing that picture of the junkyard dogs on the wall. Eventually, he sees a picture of Muddy and Rita. And this is another one I want to ask about what an AI can do. And does it mean what's being implied? Could it mean more than one thing? They get calmed down. He tells him, that's my wife in that picture, because Joe's looking at the picture. Beta's looking at the picture. And he says, she was sick. We thought we had it beat. He came back. She was everything to me. And at this point, he's also said that she died. And he looks at him and he says, do you understand? And the robot takes his helmet off and bows his head. And Muddy says, you understand. I know that you're thinking that's because the AI has developed the ability to be truly empathic, right?
To a degree.
But what leads to that?
Leads to him having empathy?
Yeah.
I mean, I am not an expert in artificial intelligence.
I know.
But it always begins, as we all know, with, the robots, they'll never be able to, think on their own. And then they always do.
So it's literally just 2 panels. Muddy says, do you understand? One panel next is Joe taking off his helmet. And then the next is silhouette of them standing there and him holding his helmet. So what I'm saying is, if this story is saying that the artificial intelligence is able to develop emotions and empathy and caring, and that's all cool. I like that. I just think it's interesting to also think about if it was simply operating under logic and it had a true understanding of humanity, that would be the proper response. And we do learn a little bit more about Emily. Emily's probably my second favorite character next to Unit Beta, personally. I like her. And she's got a picture of her mom and says that she'd hate it here, and a Jaws poster on the wall, which is old school, like pretty cool character to me. I like how much they can tell you just by showing you that kind of stuff. So obviously it's significant to her, or the author wants us to understand it's significant that she had a stronger connection to her mom than perhaps the others did, which we hear more about a little bit later. And then Gary Frank, master of the I don't know where headshots. Mm-hmm. And the first appearance of the custodian. You probably don't know that's his name, but it is.
Like, was it necessary to shoot the cop?
Yeah, the cop, it's like a scene out of Fargo, is what it makes me think of. Like a Coen Brothers movie or something. There's these two cops interviewing the guy at the gas station. Guy at the gas station says he had a gun and he was going to shoot the robot. Robot broke the gun and ran off with the funny papers, like you said. And then it's PHUTT, courtesy of Rob Lee. That's the sound of a silencer. And I'm like, it's crazy because you see the panel on the way it's drawn. Basically, they both get shot through the left eye. He shoots both police officers separately through the left eye. It sounds like... And I used real sound effects for that, obviously. But that's what the words look like on here. Fantastic letters. And then we see the custodian. Now, the only reason I know this dude's name is the custodian is in the write-up on the back of the book. It's mentioned. And so that's been said on the Facebook groups a lot. Like, that's who Jeff Johns is referring to in that. Why he's really called this custodian, I'm not super sure.
Because he cleans stuff up, dude. Why else would someone be called the custodian if they weren't the person who cleans up other people's messes?
That's what I thought too. And then when we get to the second, or the 4 through 6, there's a different variable that we can talk about.
Well, and also custodians... like a custodial guardianship, like the root word of custodian is also someone who watches over another. Custody.
Yeah, maybe he's the custodian of all the units, or he was going to be. But anyway, we do know more. No, it's okay.
I got too far into it.
No, I don't think you know. There's some more detail about him, which is like, makes me want to know why he's called that. So we see this custodian guy. He's with some other Ubermensch looking soldier guys that have red lightning bolts. And I believe, they got American flags. We do not see the Founding Fathers symbol anywhere, though, on these guys. We just see American flags and red lightning bolts. And even their masks are in the style of Joe, but they're clearly humans for multiple reasons that we see later. And because you can see, like, the skin of their necks. But it's interesting, like, that the style of their masks is identical to Joe. His, like, headpiece style. And going into issue 3, the only thing that, you wake up and Joe's doing all his laundry, he's cleaning his house. Neighbor guy tries to introduce himself again and he kicks him out again. We don't really learn a lot of exciting stuff about Mr. Sam Munn other than what his daughter yells at him about later that we'll talk about. So Joe's doing laundry, he's cleaning up everything, and there's this just really cool thing where Muddy goes up to him and says, "Why'd you come here?" And you just get the next panel of Joe looking. And you can tell he's looking at Muddy. And in the background the whole time is a dryer going. And it's just BABUMP from Rob Lee. That noise of laundry or washer, dryer, both. Yeah, that one. But it's cool because he says, "Why'd you come here?" And then we just get this huge full-page spread scene of when they're sitting there playing cards. I think it's Matches is standing up, telling like a story or talking to him, and they're all laughing and Joe's sitting right there. And the implication is that the robot is saying, they're thinking, "I came here looking for my friends that I met in the jungle." Mm-hmm. Because when you really think about it, all my logical crap or whatever from before is pretty much out the window with that. Mm-hmm. You know, because he if he chose to shut down instead of going and finding money back then, there's so many questions. So many questions. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on the kids going to school.
Oh, well, we don't need to.
Because I think there's...
Just the one kid's looking into them going to school. It's just kind of showing the family dynamic. It's more or less made to make you like Emily. And you do.
Well, you do like Emily, and I think this is a little bit of a challenge for me because they go out of their way to tell you more about Emily. They go out of their way to kind of take away from Grace a bit and like kind of make her seem like a materialistic jerk. And that's understandable. She's acting like one. Then there's this reference to the fact that Dad is trying to make sure Emily knows she's going to be in the art class, but in this small town, that's just it's just an art class, and it's not as special as it was in San Francisco. So we're getting all these peppered specific details that we want to understand that she's into art at a deeper level, and all this kind of stuff that I don't know that you gets touched on a lot later. I'll tell you, before they get to school, most important part of this whole comic book to me was this next thing. This is like an emotional moment for me when they go back to Muddy's house and like they're like chatting and Muddy's it's like, okay, you cleaned everything up, you shined my shoes, you did my dishes. There's really nothing else you have to do. Why don't we try to figure out where you're from? And he takes out like a map and he's like, can you tell me on the map? And he can't. And then he's like, I know, I should look at your dog tags. And understand, when I read this, I read it in chronological order, just like you did. I had read Who is Redcoat. And as soon as he pulls out these dog tags, and it's half the page, and these dog tags are sitting in Muddy's hand, and you see that symbol, and I was like, that is the symbol that George Washington drew in Magic in 1776 to defeat the Hessians and the British in the Battle of Trenton. Mm-hmm. I was like, yes! This is like Valiant Comics. Like, some people will appreciate that. If you don't, it's awesome that it's an interconnected universe. Because right now the year is 2022. We saw that symbol in Magic in 1776. And then we also see it in some other places as well through time. It's just so exciting to me because it speaks to the building of a universe, taking your time, pacing correctly. It's just awesome. There's a whole bunch of people in the Facebook group that are like, can they make those dog tags? I'd wear those dog tags. There you go, Ghost Machine Pro. Make yourself some Founding Fathers dog tags. We will give you our money. We will. They go to school, and I was like, okay, great. We get a scene that looks like the nerdy kid gets picked on, and it sucks. And ironically, she gets covered in paint, even though she's an artist. And didn't feel like we got a lot out of that. I kind of would have just liked to learn a little bit more about Emily, and maybe you have one kid pick on her or something. I don't know. And the only reason I say that is this doesn't, as far as I recall, turn into a story about a lot more about that path of hers. Obviously, she's like in the world of Joe and what happens, but we don't really like get to learn more about her wonderful high school experience. So having it be that bad, it doesn't really set the stage for anything. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, maybe a little bit of her character.
But we never see this horrible girl again that like pushes her into the paint or makes fun of her, or like it's just hey, this is a scene where we're meant to tell you that the nerd, as usual, is about to get picked on, nothing's going to happen, and they'll get embarrassed by some lousy circumstances.
Well, maybe, Mr. Robot over there, it's supposed to show empathy towards her.
What, for like from us?
Yes. Like,
sure.
Oh, that's gotta suck. You just moved to middle of nowhere, Indiana. Your siblings are awful. Your dad's ignoring the fact that your mom just died. Your neighbor is into something that you're kind of into as well, but he doesn't talk to anybody, and his wife just died, and everything's awful, awful, awful.
I'll give you that. By her going through that at school, and us seeing it when she later blows up on her dad about how she feels like they moved to Indiana because he can't deal with ever talking about their mom passing away, it does help see how she explodes. Mm-hmm. I get that. You know, you can feel the frustration in her eyes. You can see it in her eyes. the way it's drawn. Like, I don't think I've seen people drawn with rage tears as effectively as this in a comic book ever before.
That was pretty good.
And it's a great juxtaposition because as it's happening, right before we see all that, in Muddy's house, he knocks over a coffee cup. It's the Rita coffee cup.
I know.
But what happens though? As soon as the coffee cup hits the ground,
it's like Joe has PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
He hears it and he's like ready to fight.
It's like an alarm goes off in him. He starts banging on different things on the wall, and he's even about to pick up the TV and throw it. And what's crazy is, like you said, it seems like Joe, a robot, has post-traumatic stress disorder, or at least is reacting based on his memory of a conflict or something like that, because this one coffee cup breaking, and he feels like he has to begin being violent and throwing things. And then in the very end, the last panel of this issue is him with Muddy hugging him with his head down.
Yeah, that is like gorgeous.
Oh, it's a beautifully drawn thing, and it's really neat that Emily's in the window, right? She runs out of her house because
she's sneaky.
Well, she wants to get away from it all, and so she.
I mean, I agree with that, and I do like her, but she's literally right outside their window, just looking in.
Yeah, I know, but
and it's nighttime too.
She's been through a lot, like you said. She got 2 whole pages dedicated. They only get 1 page to this. She got 2 whole pages dedicated to getting picked on her first day of school.
I know.
So it's significant that it seems like the robot's actually getting a benefit from a human consoling it. There's no way that a logical programming anything can lead it to that, in my opinion. So that is why I keep asking the same question. And that is why I think the conclusion is that, yes, it has the ability to develop emotions. Kind of like, in the Nexus 6 in Blade Runner or whatever. But the last thing about this panel that's significant is that Muddy, remember, this was the world's greatest wife cup. We saw this earlier in several instances to remind us about his love for Rita and their connection. And he says, "It was just a mug, Joe. It was only an old mug." And you can tell that he means that because he's genuinely more worried about consoling Joe. There's so much more to unwrap with this character. There's so much going on. Can't believe that, the last time we saw him, he was fighting Geiger, and this is what we're seeing now. Like, there's so much that comes out of this awesome character.
Absolutely. I have questions that I believe some will be answered in the next 3 issues I read.
That's true. That being said, ironically, our next episode, we won't be reading those 3 issues. I know. Remember, the way that the format works is when a new issue comes out, we read it the following week. So everybody has time to actually go out and get it and read it. And when the day that this episode airs is going to be Wednesday, May 8th, which is the release date for the second printings of Geiger 1, Redcoat 1, and Rook Exodus 1. But it's also the release date for Geiger number 2. Remember our friend that's going to be joining us to be interviewed about MegaCon? He's also going to join us to talk about Geiger number 2. If you didn't go out and get your copy of that today, Wednesday, May 8th, go to your local comic book shop and grab one.
I'm excited.
Yeah. And then we'll be continuing our deep dive into Junkyard Joe, which will be issues 4 through 6 the week after that. Did you have anything else to add tonight, Snogs?
No, I rather enjoyed this story.
It was a good one, some serious stuff. I know we talked a lot about some deep things. Thanks again for joining us on the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast.